law. I forget which part or which meeting that we will talk about the consumer protection law. But today, for this special event, consumer protection law will be delivered by Profesor Dr. Stephen Kost from Jerman. Ya, jadi hari ini untuk materi mengenai perlindungan konsumen itu akan disampaikan oleh Bapak Profesor Stephen Kost, yang mana beliau ini berasal dari Jerman, gitu ya, dari Universitas der Bundeswehr München. Is it right to spell it? Oke. Kemudian nantinya saya minta untuk teman-teman bisa membuat resume ataupun summarize dari diskusi kita hari ini. So you have to make summaries for our discussion today, yeah, and then it will be the presents for your class, and also you are not allowed use your phone, yeah, while this session is running. So for the professor Stephen Kost, maybe the time is yours.
Ya, selamat pagi, selamat siang. Saya mau kenalkan saya, ya. Saya Profesor Stephen Kost. Saya profesor di Bundeswehr University. Bundeswehr University itu University German Army di Munich. Ada dua universitas federal, biasanya itu federal negara bagian, tapi di sini universitas saya federal di Hamburg dan Munich. Dan saya punya chair untuk hukum perdata dan hukum bisnis internasional di sana di Fakultas Ekonomi. Saya mau campur sedikit, ya. So saya tidak tahu bagaimana Anda sudah bisa mengerti semua. Biasanya saya berbicara cepat bahasa Inggris. Mungkin kalau tidak, saya sudah capek, otak sudah capek, saya pindah ke Inggris. So yang mungkin terpenting untuk kuliah ini, saya tidak suka kuliah tentang hukum Jerman, hukum Eropa di Indonesia, kalau ini tidak penting untuk Anda, untuk career, untuk praktik. So kalau saya berkuliah di Indonesia, hampir 15 tahun di Indonesia, di beberapa universitas ini. Saya coba bikin kontak dengan hukum Indonesia atau bikin paralel yang penting untuk development hukum dan atau untuk understanding hukum seluruh. Dan consumer protection itu topik yang sulit di aspek ini. Karena di Indonesia hukum perlindungan konsumen di Law Number 8 Undang-Undang 899 itu materi terpisah dari hukum persaingan usaha di Undang-Undang 599 dan juga terpisah dari Civil Code, hukum kontrak. Tapi saya mau Anda sudah tahu nanti bahwa hukum persaingan usaha, hukum perlindungan konsumen, hukum perlindungan data, dan hukum kontrak itu bagian di sistem seluruh hukum komersial dan hukum bisnis. You cannot understand unfair competition, consumer protection, data protection, and contract law without knowing the parallels and the, let's say, the touching points between these aspects. And unfortunately, this is a little bit problematic in the Indonesian law education, because usually it is seen as separate from each other. Now, when we talk about the law number 8, 1999, and then maybe it's for you surprising when you wait something about the consumer protection that we talk about the unfair competition or the competition law, and maybe you are even surprised about the term of unfair competition law, because law number 8, 1999 and law number 5, 1999, that's it. Unfair competition law means behavioral competition law. It's regulated not in a special regulation. It is integrated into the civil code and the penal code. Yeah, it's actually regulated as general tort law issue. And this is already anachronistic, because in the tort law we talk about guilt, right, and damages, damage repair. And yeah, also in Germany and the European Union, the unfair competition law developed from tort law. However, if we talk about unfairness in competition, we talk about different aspects than in general tort law. Actually, it's not fitting. So, but this is the status quo in Indonesia. And before we go into the details, and then you will sooner or later you will notice why I make that in the Perlindungan Konsumen. We must see the system of the unfair competition law and the competition law in a whole. So we have actually a market behavior control, that is the Unfair Competition Act in Germany, but also in the European Union we have directives about that. B2C directive, which is business to consumer, so it's consumer protection, but competition consumer protection, regulated and integrated into the Act on Unfair Competition law in Germany, also in other member states. And then we have the market structure. This is for you, law number 5, 1999. This is more or less what we have in European Union and Germany. In Germany, for example, in the Act on Distortion of Competition. And there is the cartels, the abuse of dominant position, and the fusion control, the merger control. Yeah, so we see actually we have two sides of the medals here. Yeah, so both is protecting the competition, and in Indonesia, when we talk about the law number 8, 1999, okay, this is clear, but the unfair competition has the basis in several laws, right? So we have it first of all in the Article 382 bis. This will be 500 in the future. In the new penal code will be Article 500. And in the civil compensation under Article 1365 of the Civil Code. However, it doesn't play a big role. Yeah, because it's hard to prove the damage. That's why we need actually modification for the consumer protection, because this is not working like the normal tort law. Yeah, this is very difficult to prove, and the consumer is actually, let's say it clear, not protected by this. The consumer is maybe in a certain way protected by law number 8, 1999. But in this is not so clear. First of all, what is here competition consumer protection law? I will show you the difference. And what is contractual consumer protection law? There is no differentiation dogmatically. This is important. And second, as we all know, do you feel protected by Consumer Protection Act? Are you protected? Anda punya rasanya sudah cukup sudah cukup perlindungan untuk Anda sebagai konsumen? Do you feel protected? You feel protected? Someone said no. Why not? Why not feel protected? I mean, kenapa cukup perlindungan untuk Anda sebagai konsumen? What is the problem of the consumer protection in Indonesia? The law enforcement. The law enforcement is the problem. We have a relatively modern law, but what is it worth for if we don't have badan yang punya cukup uang untuk enforce hukum ini? Ya? So actually, we live here in Indonesia in a situation that usually the people of Indonesia are protecting themselves by being careful enough. Yeah. So but we know already, if there is misleading information, so we will not sue someone. Yeah, and we also know that the consumer protection corporations will not sue someone, maybe. Yeah, so this is the problem in Indonesia. Now, when we talk about the position of the consumer protection, we must first of all find the whole competition law system in a comprehensive way. And then we have from outside, we have the protection of the competition freedom. This is the law number 8, 1999. This is the antitrust law. Antitrust law plus merger control. It protects the frame condition for the competition against restrictions. From inside the competition, we have the what we said already, the law against unfair competition as behavioral concept. Yeah. So just an example that this is draft law, because I was too lazy to change the slides, because this is graphic and I cannot just write something in. But it's more or less the same statement, just a little bit other wording. Paragraph 1 of the German Act on Unfair Competition. This act shall serve the purpose of protecting competitors, consumers, and other market participants against unfair commercial practices. At the same time, it shall protect the interest of the public in distorted competition. Isn't that interesting? I mean, this is clearly consumer protection integrated into competition law. And that is clearly not what law number 8, 1999 does. In law number 8, 1999, we have rules about what happens if you buy a defect product. We have rules about is the seller able to, or is the seller allowed to cheat the consumer, to lie at the consumer, and so on and so on. Yeah, so we have a lot of things in the consumer protection. Under consumer protection law, of course, taught also in consumer protection law kuliah, but actually there are elements which actually should be integrated into the competition law, and not in, and other elements should be integrated into the contract law. We come to that. So, integrative concept of protection purpose. This is the relative part. We have protection of competitors, consumers, institution of the competition. And then we have, of course, the protection of the business performance, right? This is the industrial property rights, trademark, patent, copyright, and also in a certain way the unfair competition. So, of course, intellectual property right is also competition law. Should not be seen terpisah, yeah, from it. Because intellectual property right is monopolistic, but it protects monopoly to protect the human creativity and gives incentive for innovation. Yeah, so this is of course part of the whole system. Now, as we learned, I don't go into details here, as we learned, why is it making an echo? Suddenly, right? Something changed? This one I don't want to show you. As we learned that that one don't see that this is I don't have the slide I wanted here. At least I don't find here I don't have it. I have it here. So as we learned that the competition law can protect the consumer, the competitor, and the society in the interest of protecting the process of competition. Then we can ask ourselves certain situation. Let's say I sell you a television and we pay $100 and the television is working. What happened? I mean, in the law number 8, 1999, there will be rules for that I have to give you the money back or I have to repair it. Don't have to go to the detail, but clear is actually, we have a disturbance of the equilibriums in the contract. Why? Because we make a contract negotiation. I have to sell you a television. How much will you pay? You say $20. I say, no, I want $200. And then we nego, and then we end up with $100. So we make a contract. This contract is legally binding, and it means we have an equilibrium between the television, delivery of the television, and the $100 is the price. And if the television has a objective value of $300 in the market, it means I make a good business. If the television has a value at $20, you make a big good business. But this is free. We have a freedom of contract. This is the equilibrium situation, and the equilibrium situation must be preserved even if the contract has problems, right? So even if the product is not intact, the product is defect. If you give me a television which is defect, then of course the equilibriums between what I get and what I pay is disturbed. So we have a disequilibrium, and the disequilibrium should be equalized by damage repair, right? More or less, something like that. Or damage repair, or I give you the television back and get my money back, something like that. By this, we re-equalize our equilibriums, our contractual equilibrium. But one thing is clear. This is a pure contractual question. Whether you deliver, when you deliver me a defect product and I pay money and I give the money back because the product is not working, is a purely individual inter partes aspect of the contract. Nobody, I mean, the public is not interested in that you get a good television for your money, that you get a good product for your money. This is not relevant for the market. That is not relevant for the public. Of course, the government or the legislator should think, well, there should be some fairness in contract, otherwise there's no trust in the law, in the society, yeah? But contract law is individual and egoistic. Whether I make good contract with you or not, it doesn't matter for the market. Right? Understandable. Now, let's think about a television advertising, about Popeye making television advertising for a certain spinach product. And they show the spinach with that brand, and Popeye eats that, and then the muscle grow, and then they say, buy our spinach and you spare the gym. Now, what is the problem here? I mean, we don't have a contract yet, right? But many people might believe that. I mean, how many idiots are in every society? How many percent? After the pandemic, I was starting to doubt that there is such a small part. I mean, maybe 30% full idiots. But at least in every society, I will be at least 1% believing that the earth is flat. And also they believe, oh, I buy that spinach for the future and then I spare the gym. Yeah, that is happening. Some people will believe it. The question is, will it move markets? If 5 people of 300 million Indonesians believe they buy that spinach and that will change their body functions, then it is irrelevant for the market. But imagine we have a lot of Bapas and Ibus, let's say 10%, 50% people potentially believe this statement from the advertising and buy that product. What does it mean for the incentives for the market? It means that someone who is lying at the customer is winning in the market, and the one who is honest with the customer said, no, our spinach cannot change your body. It's healthy, but it doesn't change your body. But our spinach is organic. Our spinach is produced in an ethical way. It's healthy product, right? So, but the people say, yeah, healthy, organic, but I want to spare the gym. So I buy the other spinach. That one is maybe not organic and not so healthy, but they lie at the customer. It means competitor yang tidak jujur nanti win, competitor jujur lose in the market. And that is wrong incentive. It means the working competition of performance is disturbed with advertising if the advertising is disturbing the sovereignty of the consumer. With other words, the consumer can be seen in an egoistic way as part of contractual relations, or the consumer can be seen as a function in the market, as a decider about the products and decider about the best offer in the market. So, prestasi yang terbaik, nanti konsumen harus identify prestasi yang terbaik di pasar, dan itu insentif untuk kompetitor yang jujur. Ya? Kalau kompetitor bisa bohong kepada konsumen dan konsumen memutuskan based on berbasis bohong ini, itu wrong incentive. Ya? Because it makes wrong kendali yang salah ya, di pasar, the function of the competition. This is very important. We must understand in this way the consumer as a function in the market, as decider in the market. And this function of the consumer is only relevant if a significant part of the consumers is potentially misled by the advertising. If just 2-3 consumers are misled, this is irrelevant. It will not move markets. But if 10% of consumers potentially believe it, it moves market. And then it is a problem for the competition. and that should be mitigated by the competition law. So it mitigated by the consumer protection in competition law, not in individualistic way. Very important. Now, if the consumer is relevant for the market, it means, of course, we have also other purposes of the law. For example, in the healthcare. So you lie at the consumer that if they buy a bioglass product and put this medallion around their neck, they don't need to go to the doctor if they have diabetes or cancer or HIV or whatever, right? So there are in Indonesia a lot of products where they make advertising. This is good for stamina. This is good for avoiding the diabetes. This is good for cancer, and so on and so on. This is also consumer protection, which is relevant for the competition if people believe that. But also, of course, it is relevant because it causes cost for the society, even if smaller group of consumer believe it. If only 1% of the consumer believe, okay, I buy this jamu or this bioglass and then I don't go to the doctor, they will become even more sick. And or in societies where they have a social insurance, the public will pay it by the social insurance because they must go to the hospital or maybe even die, and then there is no bapa bringing the food home, right? Or, like in Indonesia, the family will care for it, or the insurance, but also the family will all the time go there and must bring the food and so on and so on. In any way, it makes social cost. So in the healthcare or in the advertising for medicaments, we have also other rules, yeah? So we should not think about, oh, there must be at least 10, 15%. But in the competition, we must check whether it really moves the market. It means the consumer interest is a relevant aspect for the working competition. And the consumer sovereignty has a clear function for the competition and not only in the individualistic way in the contractual situation. And the other aspect is the competitor's interest. Is the competitor interest ambivalent from the consumer interest? Of course not, because the competitor must be interested in a sovereign consumer, at least if it's a honest competitor. If the competitor is not honest, of course he doesn't want a sovereign consumer. But if we are an honest competitor and only we protect honest competitors, we must be interested in sovereign, strong, and well-informed consumers. This is very important. Means the interest of the competitor and the consumer are not ambivalent. They are parallel. They are same. Competitor and consumer have the same interest. And the consumer must be interested in competitors who give a good option for the market, for the offer. Because only then he gets a good product for the money. And this all is in the interest of the general society in avoiding market disturbance, right? So this is we call it the purpose triad. Yeah. So it's all influencing each other. It's interconnected with each other. You cannot understand consumer protection isolated from competition law. You cannot understand consumer interest isolated from competitors' interest. You must understand it as an integrative concept for the consumer protection law. And yeah, in the German competition law, it's interesting just to show you that, because it has an impact. Who can sue because of misleading information, for example, or threatening consumers based on the directive on B2C. It is in Germany only administrative enforcement so far until now, until 2 years ago. So it would be something like Badan and Konsum National, but in Germany there are several Badans for that, and they are well financed, and they sue competitors in the interest of consumers, and also competitors can enforce it and can sue other competitors for misleading information, for threatening consumers. But what was until now, the fact was consumers could not, because we said consumers is not, the consumer interest is not individualistic here. It's a collectivistic interest. The consumer in the competition law is protected in a collectivistic sense. That is what I mean with social concept and collectivistic concept of the consumer protection. Nowadays it's different, because nowadays we have also the individual suing option of consumers. But this is detail, we don't talk about that now. Now let's think about some examples. First of all, one thing must be understood about the consumer protection. I mean, what is it mostly? This misleading commercial acts, aggressive commercial acts. What we talk about, lying at the consumers in the advertising, threatening consumers, tell the consumer, buy that, otherwise you will be very sick, so buy that, and or you don't have any time anymore, in 5 minutes we close the shop, decide fast, something like that, make pressure to the consumer, and so on, or threaten the consumer, locking in rooms before the consumer buys something, you cannot leave. They did it with elderly people in Germany. Sometimes we call it Kaffeefahrt, so it's Jalan for coffee, yeah. So the people get offered a very cheap trip to some nice place, and then they bring them to some place, lock them in or threaten them, and then when the elderly people come home, they bought a lot of stuff they wouldn't buy otherwise, right? So they make a advertising situation. This is what we talk about, and then we must talk about, if we talk about the freedom of the choice of the consumer, the sovereignty, which influence the function of the competition, then it's very clear we cannot just take care about what you or me believe. It's not about that you believe that Popeye's spinach is helping you to avoid the gym. Yeah, who is the relevant consumer here? It's clear it's not just you or me or the judge. It's clear it must be a significant part of the consumer. So you can have exactly two ways to decide about that. You can make an empirical study. How many consumers believe that statement? That is what we did so far in Germany. That's traditionally done in Germany. So if it's more than 3 to 5% of the consumer believe it, that was misleading and was forbidden. If less than 3 to 5%, it was irrelevant, so we didn't forbid it. So the statement is okay, because you must also think there is creativity in advertising. Sometimes advertising should not be too serious, right? I mean, Popeye, come on, who really believes that? Yeah, that you eat that spinach at the Popeye and you get the muscle like Popeye. So that is actually creative advertising. We should not forbid it if it's not relevant for the market. Yeah, so we could make it empirically, but with the European consumer protection law, we found a more normative consumer protection picture. So we define a reference consumer, and we check out whether the commercial act has the potential to significantly impair the consumer's sovereignty and the potential to cause a transactional decision of the consumer based on the model of the reference consumer. And the reference consumer is can be also ada bukti dengan empirik. Yeah, of course you can make an empirical study and give it to the court and say, look, actually average consumer is like that. We can prove it with empiric, but it's not necessary. It's a normative. Means the judge can assess whether the average well-informed consumer is here potentially misled. Yeah, here we see the what is meant of that. The reasonably well-informed and reasonably observant and circumspect consumer. So consumer's ability to make an information-based decision, thus inducing him to make a transactional decision which he would not otherwise have made. Average consumer, or when the commercial practice directed towards a particular group of consumers, the average member of that group would be children, for example, advertising to children, the average child of that age or something like that. Yeah, this is the average consumer, and that must be assessed in every case. In every case, we must check what would an average, reasonably well-informed and reasonably observant and circumspect consumer believe here in the certain situation. I don't know how you buy cars. I sometimes buy cars very spontaneously. Oh, this car is cool, looks cheap. I buy that. And then I inform myself in the internet what problem has these pre-owned cars of that type, and then I'm shocked, yeah, because exactly that problem arises. That happens to me. So that is not typical for Germans. Germans, before they buy a car, they will inform about the issues of that car. What happens usually to the people who have that car? Is it expensive to repair? What are the construction aspects? And is it something like that? And then it takes them sometimes weeks or months until they decide to buy the car. So in this situation, the consumer would be very circumspect. It's very difficult to cheat a consumer about the issues of the consumption of the car or so, because the consumer will know everything about the product. But if you go to the supermarket and buy butter, I mean, you will not make a research of 3 months to buy a butter, right? I mean, you just buy the butter. And, oh, there's a butter. Oh, well, maybe you check whether it's French butter or Danish butter or Indonesian butter, and that's it. But you will not read everything on the butter. I mean, I do that because I want to know, is there sugar added or what is the fat and so. But butter is butter is butter. There is no sugar added. Butter is just butter, right? But what if they write on this butter, with the purchase of that butter, you agree of a subscription, and you must subscribe now from now on for 2 years, at least buy 10 kilo of butter of that product. And by buying it, you agree with that. It's a consent. It's not written, but it's a consent actually. Yeah, it's very surprising, right? Nobody would await that. Or internet, you may make it in the internet auctions or internet online shopping. I mean, sometimes the information is hidden much behind, and you must scroll around. And in Germany there is internet auctions, and there is maybe only 2 minutes left, and the item is actually interesting, and the time counts, and then you don't have the time to scroll down, and then they write, okay, we buy you a gold coin, we sell you a gold coin, and it says gold coin 14K. And then you find out it's just gold-plated 14K, but not really 14K gold, right? They hide it there. Or some people sell the box of iPhones and then describe what that iPhone can do and how much space storing it has, and so on and so on. And then under it is written, attention, attention, I only sell the box here, not the iPhone. Yeah, this is typically problem, and in that situation you are not so circumspect, and of course you are easy to cheat, easy to mislead. Yeah, so this is the situative situation. And now we check out some cases where that happened. The first case I would like to discuss with you is the Mars case and the Clinique case. You know all what Clinique is. This is a cosmetic brand, and I want to ask you, what comes to your mind if you hear the brand Clinique? I mean, what does the brand transfer to your mind? You are a woman. What comes to your mind if you hear the brand Clinique? What is it? Saying skincare, of course. And I mean, do you have an idea why they use the word Clinique? Clinique? I mean, what comes to your mind when you hear Clinique? Hospital. Medicine. Scientists, yeah, long decades research about skincare, and this skincare must be better than other skincare because this is not just cosmetic, yeah, this is medical skincare. But this is all, I'm sorry, I'm a very direct person in Germany, we're like that, this is all bullshit. Yeah, this is a bullshit because this is a normal cosmetic. You can make the counter check. If it was really medical skincare, it must go very deep into the skin. Yeah, otherwise it's not helping. I mean, you can maybe make in the morning when you are tired, you can make some cream and it looks a little bit better, but after a half hour it's gone. If you want to have a medical skincare, it must be deep into the skin, and then in Germany it is counting as a medical product, and a medical product is not allowed to sell online or a part of the pharmacies. Only in pharmacies it can be sold. But Clinique is sold everywhere. In warehouse, in storing, in shops, in online, in cosmetic shops. This is not really medical. So a German consumer protection agency sued the brand, the producer of the brand Clinique. And it was coming to the European Court of Justice 1994. And the Court of Justice had to decide whether that is forbidden. I mean, the German law against misleading competition, so Competition Act forbid misleading information in advertising, and they said this is misleading information because the consumer would believe with the word Clinique that it is a medical skincare, what it is not. Now we have a very interesting case here actually, because it's actually a clash between the interest of the brand owner, because this brand is old, it's already well known, so you have a property already in this brand, right? Because it's a well-known brand. I mean, imagine they cannot use the word Clinique anymore. That is expropriation of the value of the brand. And on the other side, we have the consumer sovereignty. For some years, they could only sell these products under the word Clinique, so they had to cut the C and only sell it under Clinique. But now it's sold under Clinique again because the Court of Justice, the High Court of Justice, the European Court of Justice decided the German prohibition of the use of the brand Clinique under the law of the against unfair competition is not correct, because we can say that the average consumer maybe knows and understands this is just a brand and has nothing to do with medicine. So the circumspect average consumer would not be so unclever to think, wow, I use this and then this is a medical product. Mars, something similar, also European Court of Justice. They put some red bar on it, on the package, quite big. And then they said, now 10% more chocolate. However, this red bar was in the two-dimensionally too much, because if you see it in 3 dimensions, it was much more than 10% in the graphically. Actually, 10% of 50 gram is 5 gram. This is not much. It would be like this, but it is not impressing. So they make it like that and say 10% more. 2-dimensionally was 10%, but if you see it in 3-dimensional, wrong. So the German Badan Perlindungan Konsumen sued the producer of Mars chocolate because of misleading information. Many years I was teaching that case to my students and discussed that as a good example for that the average consumer can calculate. The average consumer sees the product and see 10% of 50 is 5 gram. He can calculate. But here's a little bit a different problem, which I learned from a presentation of a Canadian colleague in Jakarta. He made a study about subliminal advertising. And subliminal advertising is very interesting. You give the people an impression, and the people are not really so rational anymore. Yeah? For example, they made some study. They gave in a shop, which also had online branch, they gave one part of the consumers, they gave a bill, the Struck, and with a pen they wrote a little smiley on the Struck. And the other part of the consumers got the Struck without the smiley. And then they checked the contentness of the consumer, how happy the consumer were with the service of the company. And you can see that a significant bigger part of the consumer who got the smiley on the Struck were more happy with the company than the one without the smiley, even if the service was exactly the same, the product was the same, right? But the people were happy with a little smiley. And if I asked you, would you make a difference whether they paint a little smiley on your Struck or not? Most people will say that doesn't make a difference. It's very important is the service and the product, but whether they put me a smiley on it, come on, ridiculous, right? But people are really influenced subliminally by this. And when you buy Mars, you go to Indomaret, or in Germany you will go to tank station, and I'm hungry. I buy the Mars. Oh, red bar. Oh, 10%. I buy that. You don't calculate around. Yeah, you are influenced. So I would say nowadays the circumspect consumer in that situation would maybe be misled by that. So this is a good example how we use this average consumer. It's not relevant what one consumer thinks. It is relevant with a significant part of the consumer is misled here. This is a very funny case about chicken clucking from 1961 of the German High Court. And they made some advertising in the radio about noodle. Noodle made with wheat and with eggs. And in that advertising you heard some chicken talking. So something like that. Yeah, chicken clucking. And then they said, buy our egg noodle. So what is the problem here? They were sued because of misleading information of consumers. Why? Because the was not conversation clocking, it was egg putting clocking. So the chicken obviously make that sound when they put an egg to the ground. But when they just talk around, they make but that was not the case. It was So the court said, the consumer hear that, and then there is the connection between, oh, this is fresh egg, because the chicken laid the egg just now, right? So they use fresh egg for the noodle, but actually they use bubuk, yeah, dry egg, so powder egg product, yeah, so secondary products, yeah, not fresh egg. Misleading information. Now, let's check. Would that case nowadays with the average consumer decided in the same way? Very, very questionable. In Indonesia, maybe. Because in Indonesia, you all might have relatives who are living in the village and maybe have chicken. But in Germany, after the World War II, Germany was very industrialized. Most people live in cities and they have no idea how about chicken talk. I have no idea how chicken talk. Nobody knows anymore. I mean, there may be some people in the rural area, they know about it, but most people will think, oh yeah, there are chicken clucking, but not is conversation, or they put an egg, or they are angry to each other. because my father, maybe you know, but I don't know that anymore. So the average consumer nowadays would not know there is a difference. So nobody would see a potential for misleading consumers with a chicken clucking nowadays anymore, right? This is also a good example for that. Let's see this example here. This one is I found that in a journal, in a news journal in Germany. This is a tank station, Jet. And Jet is always a little bit cheaper than the other tank stations, always 1 cent cheaper, more or less, 1-2 cents cheaper. And then they say here, how you know this is the customer of Jet? And then under Jet they write, schlauer ist that, it means itu lebih pintar. So, bagaimana tahu itu customer Jet? Ya, itu lebih pintar buying the fuel in Jet. And how you know? Left one has almost no brain, right one has a big normal brain. So this is actually a case of comparative advertising, which is basically not forbidden in European law, but it is forbidden if it denigrates the customer of the concurrent. So if the customer of the concurrent is insulted by the competitor, this is forbidden comparative advertising. So the question is this insulting the customer in a way that is relatively relevant for the market? Would you feel you go better to that tank station because you don't want to buy the one with a small brain? Is there anyone who would be influenced by that? It is so absurd and grotesque that nobody would say, ooh, I must go to Jet because I don't want to be that one with a small brain, right? So it's absolutely grotesque and exaggerated. So in my opinion, this advertising would not be forbidden in the rules of the comparative advertising, because the average consumer is not influenced by that. But if you make the average consumer in a different way influenced, because we had some other case like here in the right side, toilet paper and porcupine. I mean, don't know if you know that toilet paper in Germany is a cardinal product. Yeah, Germans don't survive without toilet paper. In the pandemic, the French bought cheese, sausages and good food because they were afraid they cannot have their luxury food anymore. But the German bought toilet paper. So the toilet paper was sold out everywhere. So in Germany we don't have that wonderful showers and the popo, and so the people use this toilet paper. So this is a toilet, but unfortunately toilet paper can be very hard, right? And this is not so comfortable for the popo. So there is a toilet paper which is actually wet. And that toilet paper is called Charming. And Charming has advertising in television. Charming is a bear, very fluffy, so a comic bear, so anime. Very fluffy, and there's a little bear, the baby bear and the big bear, and then they dance around and then make with a popo like that and the little tail, and then make flop flop charming, so like that, yeah. And in this advertising they show these bears together with a porcupine. A porcupine is that one with a duri, yeah. So this animal with a duri, you would not touch the porcupine, but you would touch the bear, right? So they make this porcupine in the advertising to show. Is your toilet paper also sometimes a little bit scratchy? Like that. And then show the porcupine. And actually the contrary is the bear, which is so fluffy. And then let's buy our toilet paper. So, very interesting case. The High District Court of Frankfurt am Main had to decide about that 2004 and forbid that advertising, because this advertising was denigrating the product of the competitor, and therefore it's forbidden comparative advertising. Now I can ask you, what is the difference to that one? Because this is also very exaggerated. Who would think that toilet paper is like a porcupine on the popo? Yeah, but I cannot say that. I don't know what came to the mind of the court. What I can say is that it depends on which district court you claim that, because Hamburg usually is very liberal. Frankfurt am Main, Munich is very strict. They're really strict with that. So this is the difference. Or another one is Munich, indeed, comparing mineral water with tap water. In Germany, we drink the tap water. It's clean, it's safe, it's nice, it's more healthy than the bottled water from plastic. Now, they made advertising. Are you still hanging on the bottle? And of course, it means don't buy the bottled water. Drink the tap water. This was forbidden by High District Court of Munich, 1999, because it denigrates the customer of the bottled water. So some association of bottled water was suing them. Why? Because hanging on the bottle means you are alcoholic. You hang on the alcohol bottle, yeah? Or hanging on the needle means you are a drug addict. So if you drink bottled water, you are compared with a drug addict or alcoholic, and that denigrates the customer. So Munich forbid it. In my opinion, all these cases should not be forbidden, because it's so exaggerated, not that nobody would ever believe that, yeah? But that is depending on the district court where you go, whether it's forbidden or not. In my opinion, the advertising is that the average consumer reads advertising very critical and understands this is advertising and that is exaggerating. And therefore, in my opinion, we must make an equilibrium between the entrepreneurial achievement, which is advertising. Advertising is entrepreneurial achievement, and the interest of the consumer. But the interest of the consumer, average consumer, is not so much touched here. So in my opinion, this is a typical case where we should be more liberal and not so strict. But German courts write 20 pages about one case like that, and make a study about how the consumer could understand it, and what in case that if we change the, so there's some rules. For example, if you make comic or anime and make it so absurd, then it's rather allowed. But for example, if you show a real face and make it more realistic and say, okay, that one is stupid because he goes to that tank station, and then it would be maybe forbidden because it's more serious. Yeah. Just for the end of this session, I would like to explain another aspect, because sovereignty has two sides of the consumer. The consumer is protected from the prohibitive side. Don't lie at the consumer. Don't threaten the consumer. Don't make the consumer afraid. Let the consumer sovereign. But the other side is, it is not valuable if the consumer is not informed. So the question of what do we have to tell the consumer actively, how we have to actively inform consumers. Do we have to tell the consumer without being asked about some issues of the product? For example, you buy a textile in, let's say, Uniqlo. And Indonesia, Uniqlo is mostly produced in Indonesia. But in Germany, Uniqlo produce also maybe products from Bangladesh, from Pakistan, and so on. And then maybe I'm interested in how they produce it. And we all know there was some years ago a case in Pakistan textile company where many people burned down because they locked in the people in the fabric. It's a question of the supply chain due diligence, the CSR. Now, I want to know, dear cheap, I mean, in Germany, H&M is a cheap company. It's not good quality. We count it as cheap discount products. Here is H&M is a luxury brand. Yeah. In Germany, this is cheap. We all know very cheap. We all know it's cheap product. I usually don't go because I know when I buy a jacket in an H&M, it's not accurately sewed and so. But in Indonesia, it's yeah. And Uniqlo is actually, I mean, if you don't want to be fashionable and just want to hide your nipples, then you go to Uniqlo, right? Because it's just dress. That's it. It's dress, right? You can have it. I mean, in 20 years, it will be the same clothes, right? So I love Uniqlo because it's so timeless. But it's also, Uniqlo is also not luxury product in Europe. Yeah, in Germany, it's cheap. But H&M geht gar nicht. It's not possible. But I want to know, yeah, how you produce it, H&M. Tell me. I want to know where you produce it. How is the condition of the worker in Pakistan? I see it's done in Pakistan. How's the condition? Do you already fulfill your supply chain due diligence monitoring duties in the European supply chain due diligence regulation? And they will say, yeah, they will not answer me maybe. Yeah, they will say, something like that. We always take care of blah, 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 but we will not have details. Yeah, so I will not get the reports maybe. Do I have to have the reports? So the European unfair competition law, the consumer protection unfair competition law, is having a concept of misleading by omission. So you also mislead consumers if you omit important information which are relevant for the consumer. And what is relevant for the consumer is gradual. And if it's most relevant for the consumer, the competitor even must give even negative information actively without being asked. But at least he must give me the way to find out detailed information about that issue. For example, what is the ingredients, which colors you use, which preservatives you use for the food, something like that. Yeah, you have in Indonesia a very strict labeling law that is having the same purpose, but I have the right that they give me information. For example, do you use children work? If they use children work, they must inform me. And it is depending on how close you are to the contract, how much information they must give you. If you're very close to the contract, they must give you all also negative information actively. If you're far from the contract, means advertising, maybe a little bit less. But if it's relevant, they must give you that information. This is a problem with it when it comes to the ethic of the production in developing countries. Because some of my colleagues not even talk about that in the commentaries. They not even deal with that issue. We have that already long, but if they make commentary on that, they're not right about do I have a right to know about the production condition in the production country? Most of them just calm down. They don't say anything about that. One of my colleagues wrote, the consumer has no right to know about that. Why? Because it's not directly connected to the product quality. However, of course it is connected, right? Because if we see that organic product, fair trade product are much more expensive in Europe, sometimes double price, and people are willing to pay the price, then it's a economic factor that it is fair trade and fair produced. So of course it's a part of the product. Of course I have the right to know. So we see here in the consumer protection, to close that, we have two sides. We have the prohibitive side and we have the active information side. And now we can discuss about Indonesia, about the consumer protection in Indonesia. Because sometimes when I do these presentations, then sometimes students say, Prof, can we transfer that law from Indonesia, from Germany or from European Union to Indonesia or not? And that is the wrong question. Because usually you cannot just transfer law from other countries to your own country without changing culture, right? For example, if we think about food hygienic, then we know that Singapore is very hygienic. And they don't want street food everywhere. So what they did is forbidding the street food and put all the street food in some big halls where they can control it. Everyone has a certificate. All the time come some controllers, check out is it clean or not. It means you are never sick. If in Indonesia you have the street food, I mean, I'm also almost never sick. I was becoming sick in the business lounge of Qatar or Munich, I don't know where, but not in Indonesia so far, at least not this year. But you know, the bapa frying the the pisang or making the soup on the street. I mean, how clean is that? Yeah. Or you street in the corner of the street and they give you the mangkuk with the soup. Why they wash it in the basin of old water? I mean, I should not think about that, right? So when I eat in Indonesia street food and I do that, or I go to a small warung, I just close my eyes. I don't care. I don't want to know. Yeah, I watch. Is the table clean? Yeah. Okay, table seems clean. Okay, will be lumayan. Yeah, and then I don't take the sauce, which is on the table maybe since 3 weeks, and then should be fine, yeah? And then I threw something which is under fire, and okay, but this is my risk, right? So now, should we have, Mr. Prabowo went to in Singapore and said, let's transfer the anti-corruption law, for example, to Indonesia, and so should we transfer all this Singaporean law to Indonesia? What happens with your culture if you do it? The street food culture will be dead. People have not even a kitchen sometimes at home, yeah? So they will not go to the halls. It will not work. And what will be the outcome of that transfer of the Western law, of the Singaporean law? The outcome will be, it will be not enforced, not properly, right? There will be some companies will be controlled all the time because they molest them. Other big companies will have their own rights, and then the Bapa Lima Kaki will have maybe a friend in police. Maybe he can, maybe not. Sometimes it will not be consistent. Yeah, or they will be consistent, and then the culture is that. So this is not working. So the question is here, if you translate consumer protection of European Union, will that work, or will it just lead to another erosion of the law? Because what we have in Indonesia now is erosion of the law. We have consumer protection which is not enforced. So you trust consumer protection law? Mostly you said no. If you not trust consumer protection law, for what is the law then? We have a lot of law which not enforced, means, anyway, not working. So why I should respect another law which is addressing me, right? Yeah, true, right? If I enter the aircraft and they say boarding by zones, and Bapa and Ibu already press the boarding personnel, and then they're too lazy to let them out and say, Bapa, you must wait, there is another zone first, and then they let them in, and I'm the last idiot coming into the aircraft and cannot have a space in my compartment over my seat, then next time I will not respect the law. This is erosion of the law. So this is why we need a law which is properly enforceable in the culture, historical background, economical background, and social background. And food hygienic law is not maybe enforceable like that. Also maybe not consumer protection law. If we talk about the average consumer, who is the average consumer in Indonesia, for example? Siapa konsumen rata-rata di Indonesia? Ada konsumen rata-rata di Indonesia? Indonesia is not a very homogeneous society. It's a very heterogeneous society, culturally, and from the level of the life standards. So there are many people living in the rural areas. Bapas, Ibus are not well informed. So you have these community services going all the time to the villages and talking about their rights, right? And then we are sometimes shocked that they have no idea about their rights of this. They're not informed. But in Jakarta, Surabaya, Bali, the people will be very, like everywhere in the world, whether it's Paris or Berlin or Stockholm, everywhere in the world, because they watch television, they read a lot, they know. So if you have such a heterogeneous situation, how can there be a consumer rata-rata? What is the average consumer? Because all these Bapas and Ibus in the countryside will pull the rata-rata consumer down, but then we have not a real fair consumer protection if we rely on this. This means if you make consumer protection, competition law consumer protection in Indonesia, and you want to transfer it, you must first of all decide whether the prohibitive part is really enough, or you must more strengthen the informative part. So for Indonesia, I would say the informative part, active information of the consumer, is in the moment more important than forbidding misleading information, which is anyway not workable because you have no clear rules for defining what is the average consumer. Yeah, so Indonesia needs more information to educate the well-informed, average informed consumer for the future. Yeah, instead of more prohibitive rules. So that's why we cannot just transfer it. But anyway, it is important to understand the social concept of the consumer protection and to understand the difference between individual and collective consumer protection, and understand that it is connected with the competition law and not just something terpisah from other. And also the last thing I want to say is don't forget the data protection law. The data protection law is nowadays the most active consumer protection law. Actually, in a world of online shopping and ChatGPT, we are dependent on protection in this digital world. And this means the data protection in this era of the digitalization is the most relevant part. Yeah, we have always these interactions. So for example, Facebook collecting data, this is an antitrust aspect, right? Because data is power, and the power to switch off markets or close markets. But also we have the consumer protection. With the data protection, you can also make consumer protection, because the consumer gives data as a payment. When you have your Instagram profile, it's not for free. You pay with your data. So it's nothing different whether you pay with money or with your data. When your data are abused or not used in a proper way, this means it's an aspect of consumer protection. So data protection also, you should not see it isolated. See it always in the connection with each other. Thank you very much for your attention.
Your wonderful today. So maybe we move to the Q&A session. Please raise your hand for the student that want to ask. Please, being your presenter. representative of your friends, maybe. Okay, one question.
Did you all understand or not?
Yes, of course, I think.
So not all.
Okay, hello professors. My name is Imelda, and here I would like to ask questions. Well, you already mentioned that it is quite impossible to just like transfer the law in Europe to Indonesia, right? As we must see from a different aspect, like culture and stuff. But are there any like the least that we can do to like improve our society to know better about their rights? Thank you.
I don't think it's not impossible. I just say we must assess in which amount it is possible, right? This is and this is the problem. In Indonesia, often it happens that they only translate it. So translate it, or maybe put it like data protection. Data protection is not such a problematic issue because data protection is actually copied from the European GDPR, more or less. Also not working because you don't have the PA to run to enforce it, yeah. But at least you have that. But this is not a problem because that is anyway happening in the ubiquitary world, right? So we have no territorial aspect here. It's the data protection issue is everywhere the same. And Indonesia is also thinking maybe, we can make our unique data protection law, but who will respect it in America? Yeah, European Union data protection law is respected because it is a market of 400 million people. So the big data companies or the big platform companies will respect our law in a certain way. That is called the Brussels effect. We are able to enforce our law extraterritorial in a way in the digital world. And Indonesia maybe just copies that, and then it means also Indonesian law will be respected, right? So the same will happen with the ARI relation. But with others, it's true. Often we cannot just, but the task for the research is, before you design a new law, you must make the task of a proper legal comparison. And a proper legal comparison does not mean we say here is like this and there is like that. A proper legal comparison means we must identify which part of the foreign law is relevant for us, for our social structure, for example. Yeah, we must decide which part of the law is realistically enforceable. Yeah, also when we think about informal societies. So because in Germany you can control maybe certain things better than in Indonesia because you have a totally different structure of informal society. In Indonesia, for example, if I invest in Indonesia some €1,000, with some Bapa who has a good business idea, I know. I mean, I must go the risk, and if the Bapa doesn't want to give me the money back, then what can I do? I cannot sue him. It cost me time, and I will not win that maybe, yeah, because I'm a foreigner. So I go the risk, yeah. So I look the Bapa and looks trustable. So okay, I will do that, yeah. So many things based on trust in Indonesia, interpersonal trust, not so much on law. In Germany, I would say, okay, looks trustable, but however, whatever, right? Because if he doesn't give me the money back, I go to the court and sue him, and I get my money back. Yeah. So because I trust rather in the institution of the justice, and here you trust rather on your own wits and on the trust interpersonal trust between someone. So you will make a contract with someone. You would say, okay, I suppose I can. He will be fair enough to give me the money. So you cannot just translate these things which based on that structure, right? Or e-commerce law. Indonesia is based on a lot of informal business. So people make drop shipping and make a little bit selling in Instagram here, Instagram there, whereas in Germany is big platforms or big sellers. And of course you have different rights. So when we talk about garanti toko, garanti resmi and so on, there is big differences. And that's why the task is to identify what is relevant for you and what will work and what not, because otherwise you will have a law which is looking normal and the World Bank will be happy because they integrated a modern law about that, but nobody cares anymore. It is really really done and really enforced. Yeah. So what can you do to improve? It does not mean that you cannot be inspired by the foreign law. Yeah. And artificial intelligence law. Yeah. I mean, maybe check out whether it's good for your innovation or not when you just copy the European law. I think not. Better not, right? So, but this is a question of the assessment, and you cannot just say just copy or not copy, or we should do our own law. Sometimes the Indonesians exaggerate it because they discuss all the time, should we abandon the Dutch civil law? And what we replace with what we put instead of the Dutch civil law? Let's take the Adat, the national Indonesian law. But nobody tells me what the Adat is. I mean, I know what Adat is, but nobody tells me what is the common Indonesian Adat rule, which is replacing the Dutch contract law. Nobody can tell you. You find a lot of articles say Adat is the national Indonesian law. We should rather base our law on Adat than on Dutch law, because this is the bad colonial, post-colonial. Come on, Germany is also based on post-colonial because we based on Roman law, and the Roman were all the colonists. So who cares? It works, yeah. And Adat, will Adat work for investment? Adat is based on trust. Typical, right? So the trust and compromises, that is not working in the international level. So you cannot just say replacing this or replacing that. This is also exaggerated. Yeah, that is. But improve with careful translating and careful checking out, and that is the task of you. Don't write these boring articles about the 100 article about the cyber notary here, cyber notary there. Identify the interesting topic. For example, I will send a student, I hope I get the funds from my university to Makassar, and he should make an empirical study about the understanding of the average Indonesian consumer. I want that he checks that out. Is the thesis that there is the heterogeneity of the consumer really, is it really important? Or maybe it's just wrong. Maybe the Indonesian consumer is well informed. We don't know. We want to make an empirical study about that. This is valuable because that allows you to adapt the law to your specific situation, and then you can improve the society. But in the end of the day, I believe that Indonesia will always relying on more on individual trust and on mechanisms which are maybe over normative. Yeah, mechanisms which are over normative. You can make a lot of anti-corruption law here from the West, but some things will not change because some things work like that, because it's work always like that. Some say it's coming from the Dutch authorities in the colonial times, and some say it's coming from the people who were before the Dutch doing it already, but somehow it works, right? So you go to some authority and it works, yeah. So I don't care. You can do it without that, or so do it. But we will in 20 years still sit here and talk about what can we do about corruption, and then still we can discuss, take the anti-corruption law of Singapore to Indonesia. Will it really change something? This is a factor of why WTO is not making equal life condition in the world, because some countries have different cultural background, and in Thailand, for example. For the people is rather important that the president supports the north and the south is forgotten, yeah, instead of supporting whole Thailand. When Suharto was in power, everything went to Java, and people in Sumatra are very angry to Suharto, yeah. If I ask a friend of mine, if you were able to get the money and you have the power and nobody would find out, would you take the money? Of course I would take that. Anyone would. So it means he was angry about the corruption because he doesn't have that option, not because he thinks corruption is very, very bad and is consuming the power of the nation. And some people say rather support Bali than Indonesia. Yeah, so the nation of Indonesia not so important, but support Bali, or support this province or that village or that family. So these are factors which are not so easy to define, yeah, and to kind of say anti-corruption law from the West works here, because in Germany we also have corruption, but the corruption is a different thing. When corruption in Germany will be very expensive, so the Bapa must earn a lot of money, and then when it comes out, it's shaming, and he will be fired. And he will be very ashamed because the society would not accept that. But sometimes here, I think, sometimes they see that and they say, but I cannot have that. Why he can have that? Yeah, so something like, not all, of course, yeah, but sometimes people think like that. So that should be, that I cannot say that, yeah, because I don't make a study about it, but there must be maybe empiric about this, and then you can think about how we integrate anti-corruption law, that it works, and then it really does something in the society, right?
Thank you so much, Professor Stefan, for your great answer. Any question from other students? Maybe from the male? Please raise your hand.
Di bahasa?
In bahasa, it's okay. Okay. Uh, because this is required times for the voiceover. Okay. So thank you so much for your great presentations, your wonderful presentation today about consumer protection law. Maybe we can give applause for Professor Stephen. Yeah, I will never give you the conclusion because, like I have been said before, please summarize our topic today, and then you can submit the summarize to one of our staff, and then it will be your present for this class. So let's close our class today by receiving hamdalah. Alhamdulillahirabbil alamin. After I close this class, please we need to take a picture for this class with Professor Stefan. So, wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.